Hi, everyone, and welcome to another special Talk Insomnia episode. We have John with us, who was a BedTyme client of mine. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. Thanks, Daniel.
Anytime. Thanks for all the help. And first of all, I want to ask you, it was you graduated a while back, right? When did I work with you?
Yeah, so I graduated from your program. That was in it was in about March, April of 21.
Exactly.
A little bit right after the pandemic, well, mid-pandemic, obviously, when everything was locked down. So yeah, I started in February, and then got through your program about I think I did the 90 days, but 60 days I stayed with it pretty actively, and so yeah,
somewhere there. Yeah, I knew it was not quite recent. It was a little bit back. So
yeah, it was. Yeah.
well, so for the purpose here, of course, is to share your story so everybody can learn a little bit. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did this start for you?
Yeah. You know what, honestly, Daniel, it felt like something happened overnight almost. I was living in South Korea in 2019, around June. Literally seemed like overnight I couldn't sleep. I literally felt like I had lost the ability to sleep, and it's so much so that it just kind of shook my world, in the sense of one night led into the next, and I was trying to do everything I could. Come to find out through your program, trying to increase these sleep efforts, that it just continued to fuel anxiety, and I so much so, I was dealing with the tinnitus and the ringing in the ears of this hyperacusis. So it just really seemed to snowball bad, and I was very much struggling in South Korea, and I had to come back. I couldn't function. I was teaching over there, and I could not sleep. And every day I started to live to try to sleep, and sleep became so much like a performance for me, and I was stuck, and I could not figure out what the heck is going on. And I truly felt something is wrong. And I think that it's probably something so many of the listeners and people that have followed your programs, they feel like there is something wrong. Something has happened to me. And I literally, like I said, felt overnight. What the hell happened, and it became a very lonely existence. And to feel like you can't sleep. And I know you've probably heard this many times, but, if you feel like you can't do something, which come to find out through your program, sleep is a passive process. But when you're trying so hard and nothing seems to work, it's like, what is going on? It just became a huge issue, a huge burden on my life. So I came back to the States, started to, was treated medicinally through, the trazodone, the Seroquel off label, trying to do some sedative to make me sleep. But for what I found, Daniel, was that by feeling like I needed medicine, I was feeling like I needed this to help me sleep, where historically I had no problem sleeping. So, every doctor I went to, no one talked about a cognitive behavioral therapy approach. And I actually, unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize I actually had seen your YouTube channel while I was going through all of this back in the States, trying these different meds. And I really caught on to the idea of, working through our thoughts, our feelings, and how we approach sleep, and that started to jive with me, because I didn't want to feel like I needed to be on something to help me sleep. I had no issues for all my life. I was always known to be a great sleeper, and my friends would joke with me about my sleep, so anyway, I wanted to move away from any medicine or anything to say, like, I need something to help me sleep. It just felt so odd to me. And I initially had stumbled upon your YouTube, and your message was very gentle, and sort of took the pressure almost away from the need to it's a to do less approach, almost in a paradoxical approach, really, to what we would think of trying to solve X, Y, and Z. So and then from that I then explored CBT. For an application, and I didn't even really know, honestly, when I got it, that it was your program. But to me, it seemed like the right thing to do, and like I said, I started this program. I had no idea it was yours, and it came probably a little bit later that I sort of connected it to the BedTyme app and your YouTube. But this was a game changer for me, man. It completely changed, and it sounds almost silly, but the idea of when we are in tune to our thoughts and feelings and understanding, I mean, the educational aspect of this application for me totally was it changed my whole approach to what I was doing, and through the sleep efforts and really trying to sleep hygiene, doing everything in my life. I started to live to try to sleep. And this probably does not sound new to you from people, but literally my life was, how can I sleep? What do I have to do now to sleep? And I couldn't. But slowly but surely, and I from the educational component of your program, and first of all, understanding what insomnia is. Again, I think that idea of there's something wrong with me, you totally take that away and almost normalize and make. You talk a lot about the idea of like in the program of like, you are special. This insomnia is not. There's nothing unique to this insomnia, and so almost like it almost became, for lack of a better phrase, this became like the program which structured itself as little day at a time, the couple of weeks of education, along with understanding our thoughts and our actions around sleep and what we're doing. I mean, it almost became like a little, again, like a lack of a better phrase, like a friend that you could check in, someone that could really understand where you're coming from. Because people that don't experience this, it's hard for them to understand. And I would feel the same way when I did not have insomnia. I didn't know anything about it. So this application was almost like having a friend by your side every day. And I think so much, like the first 2 weeks really focused on the education of insomnia, what it is, how our habits and our thoughts affect sleep. And it was mine. It was in everything. It spoke to me. And I think, and I hope I can echo this to your listeners, that, I mean, the insomnia is not unique. It's actually, I think it follows. It's, I think a lot of us share many. I've heard some of your guests before, and I felt similar experiences to them. But the whole approach to it was simple and made a lot of sense. And your program does a lot of bringing real life examples into like this sort of what feels like a world-ending sort of condition, right? Like, I'm going to be, this is going to be my life. And so yeah, it was just a great thing for me. Yeah.
Super, super glad to hear this. And you gave us a really great kind of like big picture story of like, what happened throughout this time.
Yeah.
And I want to talk more about like what you found helpful and how things started to change, getting easier for you. But going back, oh, and by the way, this is the first time I hear that like you found the app and didn't realize it was actually the same YouTube channel.
I had no idea. I had no idea it was you, but I tell you, the app was, I loved your YouTube, and it just, like I said, your whole gentle approach to understand, and like I said, I think people with insomnia, like you said, I think we talk about the 3 Ps, like there's a certain type of person, we want to be fixers, or the act of doing more, it's for a result. And so everything you kind of talked about, it registered to me. So yeah, it didn't surprise me when I come to find out that was your application. So
okay, kind of, yeah, you saw the similarities. Yeah, that's what's really funny detail there. But yeah, going back to like how it all started, when you think back upon that, like the first kind of like sleepless night, in retrospect, was there nothing stressful going on whatsoever that you can pinpoint to, or was there something that may have been like a little bit stressful, or not really?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there was a precipitating event or situation. Obviously, it was the height of the pandemic. I was living alone in South Korea. Absolutely, I do think there was an event that occurred in, unbeknownst to me but how one event can sort of just snowball it into something that's just insane. So yeah, absolutely, I do think there was an event that occurred that just sort of like from that point on, Yeah,
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 no, I was just curious, John, because
absolutely.
mostly people can tell that, yeah, I was under some stress, and you clearly were for several reasons.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, there's no doubt about it. And again, how that sort of manifested itself into
And
sleepless.
how long was this period, when this started, and then you decided to go back to the States? How long were you still remaining in
Yeah,
Korea?
no, it's a great question. So it started in June 2020 is when I really started to experience sleepless nights, the sleeplessness, and then I came back in September of 2020, and I didn't start your program until February of 21. So it
Yeah.
was some months, like I was doing like trials with the medications. I did the biofeedback. I went into a specialist. So I mean, I was kind of doing everything, medicinally, but everything except what in some ways, was the CBT itself. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it had been some months for sure.
I
But,
hear.
yeah,
And not that necessarily this is like important in any way, but I think there may be somebody out there who is in a very similar situation. So I just want to ask you one more
yeah,
thing about this, which was
sure.
this experience of like being in a foreign country and having this problem. Um,
Yeah.
did you feel like that added maybe to the stress, or maybe it didn't differ so much because you were still kind of like it was difficult when you came back to the States? But what was that experience
Yeah.
like having this problem in a different country?
Yeah, I think with anytime you're in a foreign land, away from friends and family, I think when your health feels compromised, you feel very vulnerable. And I appreciate I would go. I remember like I went to the local clinic, and he was kind enough. He didn't speak great English, but he was so gentle, and it was he wrote me a little benzo, anything to sort of to help me kind of cut the edge, because I knew it was anxiety. I started to feel like there's something, but yeah, it was challenging in that sense because I was so far away from friends and family and my general practitioner, and so it kind of came to a point where I needed to come home.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think like, and then while I was teaching, I loved the teaching aspect in Korea, but very intense 10-hour work days, so had to really have like quick turnover and not sleeping well, and then I was like, oh boy, here's a long day, and days sort of compounded for
Yeah.
sure, so that became tough.
Totally
For
here.
sure, but
All right, so you decide, come home. You do come home, and then you mentioned you tried various things like several medications and uh, sleep hygiene, I'm sure, and
oh
uh,
yeah,
and many other things. And
that's
and
yeah.
what was like for you some experience in terms of the nights? Was it more like the totally sleepless nights, or was it kind of very choppy nights, or you didn't feel like you slept, or what was it like that experience?
Yeah, and I think for me, Daniel, it was very, I mean, very choppy. I mean, I feel like I'd fall asleep and I'd jump right back up. Sort of that hypervigilance. You could certainly tell. I mean, I knew it was. I feel like you could touch me. My body was sort of always jumping. I mean, it was like, I know you talk about that a lot in your program as well. There's a section, and it's sort of related to the idea when you're so, your nervous system is so out of whack. But I mean, yeah, I would just every 10 minutes I was up and waking, jerking, herky jerky, and so yeah, it was just such a it really scared me to be frank,
Totally.
entirely terrifying. And so yeah, I mean those I mean that lasted for a long time. And yeah, but then yeah, obviously some nights were just sleepless, and I would do everything everything in the world that I could to alter my living arrangement, environment, whatever I could to get on the good side of sleep, so to speak. So
Totally here.
yeah.
And as we were kind of like, continuing the story towards when you found BedTyme and things started to get a little bit easier, was there, did you stay on a certain medication, or was it kind of like just on and off and nothing really, you
Yeah,
didn't stay on anything?
no, yeah. I stayed. When I got back to the States, with the trazodone and Seroquel, kind of jumping back and forth, working with that. I was still on the Seroquel on a low dose for maybe 7-10 days when I started your program, and I know you kind of addressed that. This is for anyone that on or off medication, and because I wanted to transition away from any medication. It wasn't making. I didn't feel rested. It's more of a sedating effect, and so yeah, a little bit of medication. that I was on. And eventually, like I said, I literally through that program, I felt more confident. Sleep confidence sort of became a little bit more. It's crazy how like sleep is like performance. It's weird. It kind of felt like a performance at a certain point, and it just was so bizarre. But yeah, your program just sort of gently reintroduced everything. Like the confidence in believing in that you can do this. I mean, you really can lose confidence in your sleeping ability. As bizarre as that may sound, but it's true. So yeah, that's kind of how the transition from medication to your program. Once I got off that medication, then I was fully, in your program. And kid you not, I mean, it did not take long for me to start sleeping again. Right as I found your program, I was very regimented with it, and it's very simple. Check in the morning, get your educational piece. And like I said, it's almost, I don't want to share too much. I mean, it's a wonderful program, but it's almost like, I was doing so much prior to your program that this felt so easy, and I was like, this is easy. But in fact, I'm getting results. And so it's like I said, really paradoxical to like anything we do in life, like working out,
Yes.
so it's like, oh, wow, this is like, okay, I'm totally jacked. So it did not take long, Daniel, for your program, like to start, like you said, the educational piece was critical. I work as a social worker in a hospital, and I always tell my patients, you don't know what you don't know. And, if you don't know about insomnia and what it is, that education is critical component. And so there was the first 2 weeks were really helpful with that.
Yeah, and it's it really is that like the first 2 weeks. I think that's when people are really motivated too. So I try to like put the really like the most helpful like educational piece in the first 2 weeks. But it sounds like for you it was really like when you just started understanding what had happened, that sort of automatically led to sleep happening a little easier, right?
Yeah. It was like you said, when you kind of like I said, very almost normalized it, made it not so much about me, but it's, yeah, like you said, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah, it kind of took the edge off completely. And like you said, like I said, yeah, those 2 weeks are huge. I think I hope for your listeners also they can see like, and I agree, the idea of like, I think you get to this point in your life, and yeah, I feel like most people would be quite motivated, and it doesn't take a lot to like that motivation can then build. One day leads to the next, and checking in with the app, and it happens quickly. And I will say, the thing that was helpful for me, Daniel, was knowing how accessible you were. 'Cause, it took time, of course. We knew it wasn't going to be overnight, but just checking in when they were, having just little struggles. I just felt like you were it always felt spot on. And I just felt like I had it's, for lack of a better phrase, just like a friend, somebody, a coach, someone that is there with you, because like I said, it is such an isolating existence. It really is, for a long time.
Yeah, I'm super glad you found it and that it was so helpful. And I want to ask you about this because even though you find that, oh wow, I start to understand, it can really open your eyes to what had happened. It doesn't necessarily means it's like a quick or easy path. But for you, was it quite was it kind of like a lot of speed bumps, like bumpy, or not so much? Was it kind of more a smoother transition out of insomnia, if you will?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, it was bumpy. I mean, it took. I mean, it was bumpy. I mean, from if I was even to sleep 4 hours, it took time to even get to 4 hours of like, oh wow, I slept for 4 hours through the night. And then I'd wake up and just kind of in a hyper arousal state. But the knowing like, oh wow, like I felt somewhat a bit more rested than normal. So no, it's and even to this day, like it's always it's there, but the idea of like how you talk a lot about some programs, like how do you respond to that? Like how do you go about your day following that? Like what do you do? Are you attaching what emotion are you attaching to that sleepless night or a bad night? Are you so that idea and just being gentle with it and proving that you can still carry about your day even on XY, because that idea of we have to have so many hours and all that's all in your program, and you cover that beautifully. And but yeah, it's been a road for sure. I mean, I still feel like my I often, the thing I like about your program is like I can always go back to it. It's been over a year now, but I'm always able to kind of flip back into the sections and kind of pick anything out that I may be kind of tuning up, and it's always there for me. So.
Yeah, that's right. You always have access to it, all the modules and everything. And then was there a point where you, I mean, you did decide to graduate, so I even think it must have been quite a little easier. But was there a point that was there some point where you felt like, I think this struggle is over for me? Like I think, was it, did that gradually start to feel like that, or was there a point that you remember when you thought that?
Yeah, I think a couple months in, it was a sense of belief, and again, I think it was almost like the confidence was back, kind of like I really kind of felt like I was okay. I didn't really need to check in every day into the program, or like I felt like I had a good handle on it. So I'd say a couple months in, I was feeling good, and like say even 30 days. I mean, it happened. It didn't take long for me at all to start sleeping. And like I said, I was at such a hyper aroused state to then go to your program. And like I said, once I got off the Seroquel and I just transitioned into your program, it got better. And so again, I think the confidence of that, the results were showing for themselves. And eventually. And I think that's probably, I'm sure your hope for everyone is eventually they won't need a program, but the idea of like, once you're able to kind of move forward and believe like, I'm good, I feel like, it was a cool feeling, for sure. Yeah.
So glad. And I want to ask you one other question that I ask a lot of guests here, which is, did you find that what you learned from this struggle with insomnia, that it's that you could apply to like other aspects of life?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. I work in a hospital setting, and anytime I assess patients if they're having any psychological, any sort of physical, any distress, I mean, I always ask, how are you sleeping? I mean, I never would have really gone there first, but are you sleeping? We know what that does to our mental functioning and physical. I mean, if you're not sleeping well, what it does. I mean, absolutely. So now 100%, Daniel. I mean, it's so for that, I'm blessed in the sense because I can understand it. So many times, Daniel, in the hospital setting, I mean, we'll see patients who are just beside this. I just want to sleep, and I hear that so often, and I just say, I understand, I do understand your struggle and the need, and but in that, and I think, and I think so many people just want a drug, and again, I nothing against medicine at all, of course, but the idea of like, I need something to help me sleep, and the idea that sort of will be the answer. But yeah, so yeah, great question. Yeah, it's tremendously helped me in the medical field and working with folks constantly all the time.
I'm so glad to hear that, and honestly, I think as I think I'm sure we both see this the same way. There are so many people out there struggling with sleep that are not really getting the education and help they need, and how is that going to change? Which I hope it will. Well, I see it this way, that it's just kind of like, person to person, almost like you now have this understanding, and you happen to be a social worker. You interact with people, and you can educate them, and then they can learn. And I somehow see that's how the word will get out there, things will change. So I'm very glad that you not only found this helpful for yourself, but you can actually help others now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it's huge, and I hope that the profession, and and I try to talk about the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and that idea of the support that is out there. And just to say, like, just being mindful of our thoughts and our feelings and our how we ascribe certain things or emotions to sleep. I mean, that's just huge, and it sounds crazy and maybe for some, but I agree. It's just like, once you sort of get a handle of your thoughts and how you attach your emotions to certain like situations, like, it completely change. And even related to sleep. And I mean, that was, like, even in my master's program, like, we never talked about sleep or CBT. I mean, CBT, yes, of course we talked about that, all the time. It's like, therapeutic model, but for insomnia, like, oh my God, like, so even for someone like me who went through school, like, I never
Yeah.
considered insomnia as a therapeutic approach using cognitive behavioral therapy, which you've
Huge,
done.
huge,
So
a huge lack of education there for everyone, like
yeah,
physicians.
tremendously.
Now, last question for you is this one: if you could like go back and talk to yourself, maybe during the time you were in Korea there, or when the struggle was really intense, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, yeah. One I would say is, you are okay. You are okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Another thing is, the doctor Googles we all go to and trying to find, the perfect answer and understand what is wrong with me. And I would just tell myself to just, you know, be graceful towards yourself and be patient and be kind, and things will be okay. And because as you said, it's in a precipitating event, but how that rolls in over into sleep, it's incredible, really, and how that can snowball. But yeah, I would just try to be more gentle towards myself with everything, and I would probably for everybody sort of that idea to know that like there's nothing wrong with you, and I love what you always say, Danny, in your program, and this stuck with me, that it's the individual is special and unique. Your insomnia is not. And I think once you understand that, like that will change it. That will open all the doors to kind of working through this. You are special. Your insomnia is not. And so that was awesome. And that has stuck with me for sure.
So glad. That's so well said. And yeah, I just want to thank you, John, for being here and sharing a message of hope, inspiration
Thank you,
for our
Thank
community.
you. No, and thank you for all you do for the for the world, and putting all your message out there for everyone. Because I've read your comments from folks. I think you're making a world of a difference, and I mean literally, and I don't say this lightly, saving lives, because I think for some people it can get that bad, and it gets dark, when you're struggling. So thank you for all you do in your program, and yeah, I can't say enough about the BedTyme program. So thank you very much.
Anytime. It's music to my ears. So glad to hear that. All right, John. Well, we'll say bye for now, but stay in touch. All right.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Bye bye.